Both sides are divided. Democrats are banding together to build their case for impeachment, while most Republicans are coming to President Trump's defense.
I found the allegations deeply disturbing. I also found them very credible.
This after Representative Adam Schiff and other members of the House Intelligence Committee read through the whistleblower complaint, and after the release of the transcript of Trump's phone call with the president of Ukraine. Democrats are insisting there was quid pro quo. Most Republicans, though, say there's no smoking gun.
To impeach any president over a phone call like this would be insane.
The transcript shows President Trump asking President Zelensky to look into Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden's actions as vice president that allegedly might have helped his son Hunter's business dealings in Ukraine. Trump also asked Zelensky to work with his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and Attorney General Bill Barr. But Zelensky says he wasn't pressured.
I think, and you read it, that nobody pushed me. Yes.
In other words, no pressure.
The Justice Department says President Trump and the Attorney General never spoke about the call, and Barr never contacted Ukraine.
You take a look at that call, it was perfect. I didn't do it. There was no quid pro quo.
Still, for the first time, the majority of the House now supports the impeachment inquiry. William Ricardella with the Washington Examiner tells CBN News it's all political.
Nothing came out here. Now you have Democrats in a frenzy. They're doubling down on the impeachment inquiry. They really have no choice. They can't come out now and say, hey, look, you know what, we were wrong about the transcript. This is all political. It looks like it was political from the beginning, and it seems it's going to continue that way.
And today, the acting director of national intelligence will testify on Capitol Hill about his handling of the whistleblower complaint. The complaint itself could also be declassified today. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Articles of impeachment are initiated in the House of Representatives. And in order to get that, there's got to be a majority vote. So I don't know if Nancy Pelosi has taken a vote. It's made a unilateral decision, but that's for starters. Then it's got to go to the Senate, and the Senate has to have a 2/3 vote to impeach. Now, do you think with a Republican-controlled Senate such a thing's going to happen? Of course not. So this is an exercise in absolute futility. So what are the Democrats trying to do in the House? Well, what are they going to do? Well, they can sort of put a black mark on the president. But the American people don't like that. And Chief Political Analyst David Brody is going to join us now. And David, the Republicans say the transcript is nothing, and Democrats said they calls for a case of impeachment. Well, what do you think? They say it's all politics? Well, what's your take?
There's no doubt, Pat, that this is all politics. I think everybody can pretty much agree on that, Democrats and Republicans, though the Democrats might have a beef or two about that. But look, we heard so much about the transcript, the call transcript, and it was somewhat of a nothing burger in the sense that there was no specific quid pro quo, no favor done to investigate investigate Biden. However, we now have the whistleblower report. I've got it right here, Pat. And I can tell you right now, this is going to make some news because it's not just about the call. And I need to read you, if I could, Pat, a couple of these lines that Democrats are going to latch onto. And I can guarantee you there'll be some questions for the White House about this. And here's what it says. This is the whistleblower speaking. White House officials told me that they were directed by White House lawyers to remove the electronic transcript of that conversation from the computer system in which such transcripts are typically stored for coordination, etc. Instead, the transcript was loaded into a separate electronic system that is otherwise used to store and handle classified information on an especially sensitive nature. So that obviously is going to open up a whole can of worms and some questions for the White House, which is why exactly was it moved? Now, I can tell you, I was speaking to some White House officials this morning. They had heard a little bit. They hadn't seen the whistleblower complaint at that point, but they had heard about this transcript in the server. And what they're telling me is that what does it matter? Because ultimately, classified material is classified material no matter where it's stored. Still, it begs the question, why indeed was this specific conversation transferred to a separate system? Now, One last thing. I know I might feel like I'm rambling here a little bit, but as I read through this whistleblower complaint, Pat, it says, and I can tell you there's a couple of times here where I can guarantee you the Trump supporters are going to yell deep state all the way because basically, and if I can find it here, but they talk about multiple White House officials were giving the whistleblower information. And this is multiple times throughout the whistleblower complaint. So in other words, this isn't just a whistleblower. The whistleblower came forward, but he or she is getting information from multiple people inside the White House and also potentially at the State Department and other places. That screams deep state to folks that subscribe to that portion of what's going on here.
David, who are they? Do you have any idea who's inside the administration that's leaking this stuff?
Well, there are all sorts of rumors out there, and there are all sorts. There's a big guessing game. I will tell you this, and once again, Pat, I just received this moments ago, so I'm kind of going through it. I know there are a couple of names mentioned in here of some folks that were actually listening to the call. Now, I can tell you that there was about, I believe they say, a dozen folks that were listening to that phone call between the Ukrainian president and Donald Trump. So if there's about a dozen, I mean, the guessing game starts there with those folks that were in the room. They were in the Situation Room listening. That is standard procedure typically. But when word got out about what was said about Biden in the call, that's when other situations or people started to move on this.
Well, David, I don't see anything in the world wrong. There's not an official inquiry. We're not under any kind of a ban by a court. To move something from a less sensitive server to a super secret server, what in the world's wrong with that?
Yeah, there's no clear indication that there would be anything technically wrong with that. I think it just raises the suspicion level as to why you would do it. And I think that question needs to be answered. And plus, Pat, at this point, a lawyer obviously would have to kind of get into all of that legality as to whether or not that matters. That's above my pay grade. But I can tell you that Democrats are going to latch on to that portion of the whistleblower complaint. But once again, I have to tell you, Pat, I'm reading through this, and it's a first glance of reading through it, but there are multiple times here where this whistleblower says, I didn't know any of this firsthand, that all of these people in the White House and in the State Department and other places were telling me all this information. So think about this. I mean, this is a whistleblower with tentacles that are all of these tentacles kind of coming into this person with information, which means there's a lot of folks that are looking to obviously get rid of this president. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. I don't think that's a subjective statement at all. I think it's pretty objective at this point. There are a lot of folks that want to get this president. We know about that anonymous Washington Post op-ed that came out, a while back. So, look, I can guarantee you the White House is going to say deep state. This has deep state all over it, including the server.
David, how extensive was the cleanup when Trump took over? I really believe there are many, many jobs that still haven't been filled. So has he really cleaned house, or he talked about draining the swamp? Has the swamp really been drained?
Well, part of the problem, Pat, is that he hasn't really replaced a lot of folks that were, in other words, there's a lot of vacancies all across the U.S. government. I think that's part of the problem. He doesn't have his people in there. But as you know, Pat, I mean, that State Department, and not just the State Department, but the CIA and the FBI and even some within the Justice Department, I mean, these are career officials, many of them back to the Obama administration, some even before that. So this is a town that is swampy in nature. It always has been. And when you have a president like Donald Trump who is rattling a few cages, this is what you're going to get.
One last thing. This whole impeachment thing is an exercise in futility. It can't go anywhere. It can't succeed. So what do the Democrats think they're doing? I mean, how are you going to go before the American people into 2020 and say, here's our agenda to make America a nice place to live in? We have tried to impeach the president, and it failed. You remember under Clinton was the subject, and he got reelected, and Newt Gingrich, who's leading the charge, he lost. So these guys are going to lose big time, don't you think?
Well, let me just say this. It is very clear that Nancy Pelosi is doing something strategic here. She never actually used the word impeachment during that address she said the other day, but I will tell you this. When she said that we're going to do this impeachment inquiry, she never said we're going to take a vote on impeachment, because they know that that is a political suicide for them if they take a vote. A vote on what exactly? What crime has been committed? And at this point, it seems like Democrats are, in essence, impeaching, or they want to impeach this president for being a really bad guy and bad behavior and some unethical stuff. And that's kind of their point of all of that. So, look, this is very interesting, Pat. One last thing to say, because here's what we could face in the next year. This president could indeed be impeached by the House of Representatives. There is no doubt about that. No chance of conviction in the Senate at this point. However, Donald Trump could actually be the first president in United States history to win re-election while being impeached. He'd actually be an impeached president and win re-election. Wouldn't that be something? The Democrats think they have the last laugh on Trump by impeaching him, and Donald Trump comes back and wins re-election. It could happen. And at this point, I'm done with all the psychotherapy. I give up, Pat. I need some serious Tylenol.
All right. Thanks, David. God bless you. Okay.